Over my shoulder is the new Peugeot 308. It's here in Australia. You can get it in a wagon. You can get it in a hatch. Prices are up, but show me a car that's come out in 2022 where the prices haven't increased. That's inflation in the economy. In today's video, we're going to be asking the question of whether these 308s are worth the best part of 50 grand, which is plenty for a small car, but Peugeot Australia are telling us that these days they are premium. So is there proof of that in the cars? We're going to be checking that out today when we jump into the 308 in GT Premium, guys. We'll check out its Napa leather-lined interior, have a look at the back seat and the boot, talk about running costs for this car, and then head out on the road to see whether the 308 is still a peach to drive. And a bit of a spoiler alert, there was actually nothing wrong with the way the old 308 drove, so it's a good thing that they've basically kept all the fundamentals of this car the same. They've really just tidied up the interior and made it considerably more refined. That sounds like a decent recipe to me, but let's check for ourselves and see what the new Peugeot 308 is really like. Before we get started, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. So basically what Peugeot has done with the new 308 is keep many of the underpinnings the same. It does have a longer wheelbase and that helps on the road, as we'll find out in a minute. But the interior is actually the part of this car which has received the most attention. The previous generation 308 was reasonably high quality inside, but the aesthetic and the technology was really dated. And that's only natural for a car that came out in, I think, 2013. So it was getting on in years. The new 308 is quite tech forward, but not in a way which is overwhelming, which is important. So we'll start from the start, and that's the iCockpit. Now, this is Peugeot's signature cabin design, and what it does is it drops a small steering wheel right in your lap, and you look over that steering wheel to some 3D gauges, which is pretty awesome, and then straight to the road with no head-up display. Now, some people love this, me included. Some people just cannot seem to work it out, and they've got like a steering wheel in between them and their speed and stuff. I don't personally understand that because evidently my torso is the right height to work with this setup, but I would never buy a Peugeot with iCockpit without test driving it first, so you know if it works for you. But anyway, those instrument binnacle gauges there, which do have a 3D function, they're pretty clean. You can turn the 3D off if it gives you sort of seasickness, but it worked for me. And then we look over here at the tech in the center. So we've got a crisp touchscreen with Peugeot's new infotainment system. That's got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So while Peugeot has improved its own software, if you don't like it, you never see it, because as soon as you jump in the car, your wireless smartphone mirroring starts up and you just get presented with your phone's operating system anyway. Down here, we've also got a small secondary screen where you can put your own shortcuts, including climate shortcuts. One thing many people didn't like about the old 308 is that it had too many taps to change the fan speed and all that stuff. Peugeot has partially addressed that with this new shortcut tray, and we still have those beautifully finished piano key shortcut hardware buttons down here too, and a volume knob. So personally, I like this interior. It works for me. Now, the wagon doesn't get Focal premium audio in GT Premium, guys, which is what I'm sitting in here, but the hatchback does, so that's odd. But the acoustic in the wagon was still really warm and pleasant to listen to, so I kind of didn't miss that premium stereo. Now, speaking of GT Premium, it's well equipped. It is expensive, no bones about it, but it comes with perforated Napa leather with seat heating, steering wheel heating, and a really high quality of finish around the cabin. Soft touch materials, Alcantara, lots of nice textures pretty much wherever you look. And practicality is not bad. We've got really big door bins, like big enough for a large bottle of water. Cup holders here, wireless smartphone charging, lots of USB-C ports, oddment storage, dual armrest, which is really deep. You'll get a champagne bottle in there, I reckon. So all in all, it's nice and easy to live with and very comfortable up front. Let's have a look at the back seat. So you're actually joining me in the 308 wagon here. So I do have a little bit more legroom than I would have in the corresponding hatchback, because the wagon has a bit longer wheelbase than the hatch, but in fact they all have a stretch wheelbase compared to the old generation 308. So how much room do I have? Well, a good amount. So this seat is in my driving position. I'm 6 foot tall, at least that's what my mom tells me. And I've got good leg room. Headroom is really generous, even with this sunroof, and tow room is fine as well, although it's probably not the best. In terms of getting someone in the center, it's a bit of a perch, so I'd probably think of this car as being good for 4 adults, maybe with an occasional 5th, but you do get air vents, USB-C ports. In terms of a flip down armrest, no, you don't, which is a little bit unusual, but there's Isofix and the upholstery is really, really plush and soft. Like, this feels like the kind of leather that you get in a vehicle double the price. So Peugeot's done a nice job there. Just a shame they left this rear door trim to be hard in a vehicle that, in this case, is going to cost you about 55 grand drive away, so certainly not cheap. I personally like the design of the new 308. It feels modern, and how good is the olivine green, which is only available on the hatch, and equally that blue that we saw in the intro, that's exclusive to the wagon. So there's plenty of good colors that you can get in this new Peugeot, and another one of those new Peugeot badges here around the back. Now on the hatch, it's a manual tailgate. It's nice and deep. It's decently big for this class, though under the boot floor, you won't find a spare wheel. That's the sub for the premium Focal stereo in this car. But you've got cubbies, you've got folding seats. But while the hatch's boot is decent, the 308 wagon is better in this regard. It has a powered tailgate, it's got a lot more boot space, and it's actually got 40, 20, 40 folding rear seats. So you can still have 4 adults in the car and have some long object going between them. So that's always nice to have. In terms of running costs, the 308 is actually quite decent because it's very economical. These cars have only got the 1.2 litre turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol engine for now, and it's really miserly. It's actually quite torquey, as we'll find out in a minute, but even pushing this 308 hatch pretty hard on some great country roads today, the worst I could do, the worst, was 8.4 litres per 100 Ks. And on the highway, that's gonna settle right down to like 5 litres per 100. So arguably, you don't even need a hybrid in this car, but Peugeot's gonna do it anyway, because a plug-in hybrid version with a 4-cylinder engine is coming next year with 165 kilowatts of power. So that's something to look forward to. In terms of servicing, it used to be expensive to service Peugeots. They've changed that in Australia with prepaid service plans that have big discounts. 3 years of servicing on the new 308 is $1,000, 5 years is $1,800, and that's very competitive for a European small car, and they've got a 5-year warranty too. All right, now for the good part. Let's take the new Peugeot 308 for a drive and see what this small car, which isn't quite as small anymore, is like from behind this small kind of square steering wheel. All right, so before I talk about the ride and handling, which is fantastic on this car, let's talk about the engine because it's very familiar. It's a carryover 1.2 litre turbocharged inline 3-cylinder petrol, one of Peugeot's pure tech engines, and it makes 96 kilowatts of power and 230 Newton meters of torque. And before you close the tab because you've just heard a number with double-digit kilowattage, you need to remember the fact that the Peugeot 308 is extremely light for the small car class. If it's not the lightest small car, then it's going to be among those vehicles, considerably lighter than a Volkswagen Golf, Mazda 3, and especially Hyundai i30 or Kia Cerato. This car's weight is very disciplined, and that means that its power to weight ratio remains decent, even though it only has 96 kilowatts of power. And that's certainly how it feels out on the road. While initial acceleration off the line is a little bit doughy unless you're in the sport driving mode, once you've got some pace on board, the 308 really piles on speed with surprising authority for an engine of such small displacement and only 3 cylinders. In fact, it's actually quite enjoyable to drive because you can kind of wring this engine out and really listen to its good noise. It's got that classic offbeat, odd-numbered cylinder count sound to it that is really pleasing to hear, and it just burbles away in the background. It's never loud or thrashy or unwanted. It's just a nice sounding engine, and it's paired to one of the good gearboxes, an 8-speed torque converter automatic that's made by Aisin, so a decent transmission, and it's quite a good partner to the engine. Not completely perfect, but 90 to 95% of its shifts are pretty imperceptible and timed intuitively without you having to do anything. However, on long downhill stretches, I have found in the 308 that it's good to take control with the paddle shifters on the steering wheel to encourage a little bit more engine braking. But on the whole, it's a refined unit, it's a punchier unit than many people would expect, and it's a very fuel efficient one, as I was explaining before. So without any kind of a hybrid system on this car, the 308 is easily able to put down really good fuel consumption numbers without you really having to change your driving style all that much, and that's going to save you at the Bowser compared to a whole bunch of other cars in this segment. And of course, if you do want more power, Or if you love your old Gen 308 GT or even GTI, then you know that there's the plug-in hybrid coming, and that is actually a 1.6 litre turbo 4-cylinder petrol with an 81 kilowatt electric motor. Combined outputs are 165 kilowatts of power, so compared to the 96 kilowatt 3-pod I'm driving now, which I think is quick enough, the plug-in hybrid should feel really quite strong and quite special by comparison. Looking forward to driving that when it arrives in Australia quite early next year. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be a replacement at all for the 308 GTI, but there is the fully electric 308, the E308, which is under active consideration for the Australian market, and I myself have encouraged Peugeot to bring that car here because it uses very little electricity to go a certain distance. It's one of the most frugal EVs that has ever been revealed, actually. So if that translates to the real world, the E308 could be really quite awesome and have a decent driving range to boot. But here with the kind of entry-level petrol powertrain, we've got a light car, and we've also got a small car with really, really nice, polished ride and handling. It starts with great steering. There's quite a bit of feel through the tiller. You know what the front end is doing. There's also good grip from the Michelin tires, decently large alloys, but the ride remains okay. But the handling itself is really, really fun. There's a little bit of body roll, not too much, but it does mean that you're not working the tires to kind of the nth degree, and the whole package just works beautifully together. From the steering to the calibration of the rear suspension, which allows a little bit of rear end rotation in the bends if you coax it. The 308 is a joy to drive for people who really enjoy great vehicle dynamics and classic front wheel drive dynamics as well. In terms of ride quality, the 308 rides well and is damped well, but there is more road feel than you might expect if you're coming out of something super plush like a Subaru Impreza. In this regard, the 308 is more like a Ford Focus in feeling sportier rather than more comfort tuned. However, I did notice on my driving today that the 308 wagon is quite a bit more plush in suspension tune than the hatch. So if you're looking for a laid back, practical vehicle that's well appointed inside, the 308 SW GT Premium should be your bag. But if you're after kind of a warm hatch experience, lots of road feel, darty steering, the 308 GT and GT Premium hatch are well calibrated for that task. The brakes also feel pretty good, but until we independently test the acceleration and braking at our own test track, I don't want to make any fundamental claims. I'll wait until I can do the work properly. Lastly, in terms of safety, the GT is pretty well equipped with AEB, blind spot monitoring, basic lane keep assist, and adaptive cruise. Going to the GT Premium sees you adding features like lane centering with a strong lane hold function and also a 360-degree camera. It's a small car, you don't really need one, but it's always nice to have, I guess, to get the car nice and straight in its parking space. So fundamentally, this is a nice update to the way the 308 drives. Riding on a stretch wheelbase, it's a little more comfy. It's a slightly more polished driving experience, but all in all, it's mainly about this interior, which is quite impressive actually. So those are my first impressions driving the new 2023 Peugeot 308 here on Australian roads. I am a 308 stan. I don't make any bones about that. I really like the way the old car drove. You could pull the fact that it had a dated interior though, and that kind of made it not as good as the then awesome Mark 7.5 Volkswagen Golf. However, now that the Golf's interior has been pulled right back, the Peugeot's interior has been given a massive improvement and the driving dynamics are still excellent. I personally put this car very close to the top of the list among small cars. It just comes down to whether you can swallow that increased price. So let me know if you can down below in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking about this car down there. While you're there, hit subscribe if you haven't already and you like our videos. There's a notification bell so you don't miss any of our uploads as well. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.